Right, okay, I was introduced, so I wouldn't go into that too much. But I thought today I'll tell you the journey, my journey into, the bio that was read today. And I hope that as I do that, you can kind of reflect on your own journey and realize that not everybody has completely different ways and journeys to getting published. So I would start with my childhood. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. So Lagos was the capital of Nigeria, is a city that sometimes reminds me of New York in terms of how, when I think about how wealth and poverty coexist and a bit of the chaos and all that, but it is a city that is very close to my heart. I loved living in Lagos. As a child, I read a lot of Enid Blyton books. I mean, I just looked on the internet and I found this photograph and I thought that is perfect because that was how kind of my mother's bookshelf was for us at the time. And I loved reading all these books, especially the famous 5 ones. I should have found a photo of that one. I love the famous 5 novels so much. For those who don't know the famous 5 novels, it's about, if I remember correctly, these group of adventurers, young, sort of teenagers, 4 children and a dog. And as a child, I really believed that I was the missing person in that group. I believed that Enid Blyton made a mistake and wrote only about those 4 and forgot about Abi in Lagos. So I made myself kind of like the 5th member of the famous 5. So much so that I one day convinced that I was on a mission directed by Enid Blyton, who had probably never heard of me and probably never will, given the fact that she's not alive. I decided to go on an adventure. I lived in a housing estate, very large, loads of families there, lots of play area. And I picked up this piece of cloth. I put in some bread, water, and I sort of put it over my shoulder because I imagined that's the same way it was, for the famous 5s. And I began hunting around the estate where we lived. I must have walked for about 6-7 hours before I realized how dark it was and how lost I was. And I started to cry. I began to cry until a kind neighbor who was taking out her trash found me and found a way to take me back home. But looking back now, I realized the power of representation in literature and how young children look to what they read, what they see, what they hear, and try to mimic that, how powerful that influence is and how important it is for there to be accurate representation across all groups in books. But I also realized that from that experience, how much of a storyteller, how much I love listening to stories. Now, growing up, my mother especially would go to sort of parties or barbecues over the weekend, and there was always this uncle. I remember this uncle I don't remember his name, but I remember him as having tribal marks. He was very, very handsome, but he had these tribal marks. So for those that have tribal marks from parts of Africa, it sort of depicts what family you're from or the language you speak or what clan or ethnicity you're from. So he had this beautiful tribal marks that really suited him. I don't often see it suiting people, but he's really suited him. And whenever we got to the events, the barbecues, he would gather all the children together and he would tell us stories and sing. I think he'd done this about 3-4 times. And I loved that the most. So that was one of the reasons why every time my mother wanted to go out to any parties, I would say, would Uncle be there? And she says, yes, that's it, Abby's going. So that, again, the power of storytelling. Now, I loved that so much, I thought I would try to start telling stories. So thinking about this, I was maybe about 6 or 7. Now, my father was in the military. He was in the Nigerian military. And that, when he left, his life was very much shaped by that experience. So he had a very regimented approach to life. And one of the rules that he gave me that I absolutely resented was that every time I came back from school, after school, I could play a little bit with the people in the neighborhood. But as soon as the street lights came on, I had to be back home. So there was obviously I didn't have a watch or anything. So my dad said, once the lights come on, and all the lights come on universally at the same time, you need to get back home. Now, for someone like me who would finish school at, say, 4 o'clock and then have what we used to call them lessons, but it's tuition, up until maybe 5, half 5, to go and play until the street lights came on often meant that I'll be back home around about 6:45. I resented that. I was this child who loved to play. And I also resented the fact that it was just me. So all the other kids would They seem to have really nice parents who let them play until whenever dinner was ready, they would have a scream, they would scream out loud and the kids would go back home. So I thought, okay, I should tell a story. I should test this power of storytelling. So this evening I go out to play. I think I get there, I go to the playground and all my friends are there and the street lights come on. So we play a bit on the swings, on the slides, and the street lights come on. And I say to them, I really have to tell you a very quick story before I go. So I invent this story of a witch called Shabulu. And I made up the name literally on the fly. A witch called Shabulu who had one eye and one leg and who loved to eat children. I also came up with a song. I added a song to this story and I told my friends that this witch would often come on when the street lights came on, and any children that were left after a certain sign, she was going to eat them up. For some reason, they were really listening to me. Everyone was like, and so I finished that story and I said, that's why I've been leaving when the street lights come on. And I don't know when she's going to come out, but there's a season and that season is upon us. And so I packed my stuff and I start to walk home. When I turned around after about a few feet of walking, there was a solemn queue of children behind me, heads down, following me home. That was the first time I realized the power of storytelling. And every time people ask me, yes, I'm a writer, but I say I'm a storyteller first. That is really important to me. I left Lagos, I would say about 25 years ago. I know I don't look that old, but I left Lagos about 25 years ago. My leaving Lagos was not planned, so I loved living in Lagos. I spent a semester or so in university studying French. While I was studying French, it felt like I was in the completely wrong, everything felt wrong. I could not for the life of me understand the language. Now, for those who don't know, what you apply to study in university and what you get really depends on a lot of factors. Who your parents know. I think at the bottom of the list is what your results are, to be honest. So you could get excellent scores to get to study law or whatever it is, but if there's no space or there's somebody else who is a little bit more connected than you, they will get to study that course. So I went in to study law because I thought that was all I would love to be, but I ended up getting French. And because I could not understand the French, and I still can't, despite attending lectures, I thought, you know what, I'm going to just start partying and having fun. So I began to have a lot of fun. And my mother was very concerned. At this time, my parents had separated, and my mother's thinking was, as many African mothers think, or used to think, maybe it has changed now. It was, if this girl does very well, her father's family are going to say, yes, we've done a great job. But if she messes up her life, they're going to look at me and say, I failed. And so unknown to me, my mother flew to the UK and made arrangements for me to come to study in the UK. And so one summer, I think it was the summer of 2000, my mother said, we're coming to the UK for summer holidays, which was amazing because I loved coming to the UK. I really loved life in the UK on holidays, I have to say. It's been 25 years and holidays are always better. And so I should have suspected something was wrong. On the flight to the UK, I remember discussing with my mother about so many plans I had after the summer. I asked her for a car. My mother said, what color? I should have known there was something wrong. I said, I want a red car. I want a Toyota Corolla with air conditioning. My mother said, you can get it. I said to her that I wanted to move out of campus and move in with my friend. My mother didn't ask what my friend's name was, what her DNA was like, what her blood group and blood type was, what everything to do with her generational ancestors was like. My mother said yes. Now, I should have known there was something really wrong at that time. So we get to the UK. We have lovely 6 weeks of summer. Now, my mother is quite meticulous with planning and packing. And apart from that, she is also one of those, and I confess I'm one of those, who always go over the allowance on flights. And so generally, my mother always says to me, Abby, you put that in your suitcase. So my mother buys everything, toothpaste, tissue paper, the whole works. 23 kg, I think it was about 30 kg at that time. They keep reducing it because of Nigerians. So it was about 20, let's say 30 kg. Usually my mother starts tossing stuff over to me. Towards the end of summer, she's like, Abby, you put that in your suitcase. But there was no Abby, you put that in your suitcase. I'm thinking, this is really weird. She's not saying anything. She's not even asking me to pack. So she starts to pack her stuff. And I go, Mom, what's going on? And she looks at me and she says, you're not going back. That is the title of an essay I wrote for HarperCollins last year, a group of Nigerian writers. Those words, you are not going back, literally changed the trajectory of my life. My mother said to me that I was staying in the UK and I was going to study law at the University of Wolverhampton. I was devastated. I was so devastated that I felt like she had betrayed me. I said, look, why didn't you discuss with me? She said, well, because I know how much you love partying and how you would have fought me and all that. And, trust me, I'm doing the best for you. I'm like, you're not doing the best for me. We've had a lot of conversations about that now, 25 years later. And, there's a lot of gratitude for that. So I get into the UK and I start to study. And for the first time, I realized, I'm a black woman. I really struggled with that. I struggled with the fact that black was more than a color, that it was an identity. That really bothered me. What also bothered me was the fact that everybody seemed to, not everybody, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. I'll say a lot of people seemed to be very fascinated by how well I spoke English. So I had to get a job. Now, that was painful. I'd never worked a day in my life. And to start to work, at first I thought, this is really cool. And then I get this job and I'm standing for 8 hours. And at the end of 8 hours, I feel like I'm literally a statue. Like I cannot move. I remember calling my family and friends back in Nigeria and just crying and think, this is ridiculous. Is this how hard it is in the UK? And then I had a job selling jewelry, diamonds. And one of the, I would get a commission based on how well I could sell insurance. So as somebody who loved, at the time, had now started to love education, because I had no choice, would study really hard the paperwork that came with the insurance to really try to convince them so I could get extra $6.99. And I would, so somebody comes in, they want to propose to their girlfriend, and they would say to me, can you recommend the diamond? And I will do that, but I'll also really sell insurance. And at the end of this whole conversation, given with my heart and soul, sometimes I'll hear, you speak very well. Where are you from? I'm thinking, can you buy insurance? What's that got to do with anything? So all of those experiences, you can imagine, I just really missed home. So I began a blog. That was really the beginning of the journey for me as a writer. So I wanted to tell you, first of all, the storyteller first into the blog. So I began a blog. It was blogger.com at the time. Hardly anyone was blogging. I wish I'd known to stick on it because I might have been a multimillionaire by now. But I began to blog about my experiences in the UK, talking about culture shock, talking about trying to find things like jollof rice, plantain, whether they exist, who can braid my hair? Why is life so hard? I thought UK was the land of gold and you could pluck money off the streets. I thought it was the holidays where I would get shopping money and get a free house. Now I had to pay rent, I had to pay bills, I had to pay for everything. Now that blog, for some really weird reason, really resonated with a lot of Nigerians in Nigeria. People began to read my blog, maybe because it was funny. I used to talk about experiences. I remember talking about my first time going to the gym and how the British accent kind of confused me, not because I couldn't speak English, but because they spoke so fast, and I speak fast now. This is really weird. But I felt that these white people speak so fast, and I think it was a gym in another part of the country where the accent was even a lot stronger. So when the gym instructor came up to me and said, do you need any help? I caught the word help. And I thought, there's no point in saying I need help because I'm not going to understand what he says. So I said, no, I'm good. I've got this. So I start the treadmill. And next thing I know, I'm sailing in the air. And I'm landing on the floor on my backside. So lesson learned there. Do not be afraid to ask for help. If you can't understand what they're saying, ask them to speak a little slower. And thank God for Google Translation these days anyway. So if they speak in another language, you can try to translate it. But so I talked about things like that, and people really found the blog nice. They began to follow it. Until one day, I get a call, and it's my mother. She's in traffic. The phone rings, and I go, hello. She goes, what is a blog? I'm like, what? She goes, I'm in radio, and I can hear them talking about you and me. So apparently, when I created the blog, I thought I was being very smart by using a combination of my maiden name and my first name. I thought nobody's going to know who I am. But I also used nicknames that only my family members knew. And so when people were talking about the blog on radio, my mother was like, what? What's going on? I know these people. And so she calls me and says, your entire family is on, the whole world is talking about you. I'm in Nigeria at the time. And so for the first time, I went behind the scenes to the blog, and I realized I had well over 1 million hits. I didn't even realize there was anything called stats behind. I had no clue that this was, viral at the time. So I stopped blogging. Really paralysis, fear. I was paralyzed by fear. I was paralyzed by the thought of being discussed on radio. So I said to myself, but I've realized something. And for some of you, there's the point when you realize something about the power of writing and how it can sort of transcend what you think it can. It can touch hearts and minds in ways you never thought it could. For me, it was that point. I realized that, hang on, there is something powerful about being able to pen down your thoughts and people resonating with it. But I also realized that I knew that I couldn't go back to blogging because I just felt like vulnerable and I was young. And so I thought I would start to write fiction. And that became the journey for me. I thought I'll marry the storyteller, remembering the days I told Shabuli stories, and the blog of writing nonfiction, marry that together and let's see what happens with the power of storytelling. I was so convinced I was going to get published from the moment I sent my first book out. So I wrote the first book. And I got a no. I mean, several no's, but you can imagine. Second book, no. I'm like, what's going on? Third book, fourth book, fifth book. So by now we're talking about 500 words or more in writing. So I thought, you know what? I'm done with this. So all this while I'm writing, I'm in 9 to 5, I'm working. I'd done my master's degree in project management. I was working in companies, but it felt like working the 9 to 5 life for me, and for some of you, you probably can relate with this a little bit. It felt like I was wearing the wrong size shoes and wearing my left feet on my right. You know, it just really felt wrong. But I kind of powered through. But while I was doing that, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm done with 9 to 5. And I wanted to find something else. I thought maybe there's something in me that can try entrepreneurship. Maybe I could try to sell shoes because I'm done with writing. I'm never going to write again. I'm never going to tell one more story again because the world just is not ready for Abi Daré. So I began to sell shoes. Now, I went on to, I can't remember this website at the time. I think it was DHgate in China. And I ordered different shoes, but it didn't occur to me that people wore other sizes apart from size 4, which is what I wear. So I had a lot of size 4 shoes at home. And, you know, it was all in a room. And I'm building a website. And my husband says, Abi, I'm kind of concerned about this journey of trying to make it rich selling shoes. He said, because, you know, what if I want to buy a shoe and I'm in size 8? And it occurred to me that, hang on, Abi, that doesn't make any sense. You're the only one that wears size 4. So I have a lot of size 4 shoes. If anyone is interested, I can get some across to you. So that messed up a bit. And also my pricing strategy was horrendous. Like by the time my husband said to me, Abi, let's try and figure out, so how much are you going to sell the shoe? Basically, I operated at a loss even from before I ordered the shoes. So I left and I thought, okay, I'll sell toys. So I got toys. I said, everybody buys toys during Christmas. I will never go back to writing. I'm getting out of 9 to 5 because I do not like the 9 to 5 life. So I ordered toys, but I had a child at the time. I'd had my first daughter at the time. And every time there was and it was, you know, those, I don't know if anybody here has sort of little kids. Everybody had a birthday party like every week. So every time there was a party, I'm like, let's just get one of those toys and wrap it up. And so very quickly, I gave out all the toys as Christmas presents and birthday presents. So that died a very quick death. And so I went back to all this while, I said I was done with writing. But after that second failed experiment, I went back to writing. So I wrote book 6, rejections, book 7, rejections, book 8, rejections. I think I must have written about 1 million words. Because at some point I wrote one book and I didn't even bother sending it. Now at this time I thought it had to do with my name. I thought maybe every time they saw the name, they thought, no, she's back again. Let's just block her. And I know some of you might feel like that at some point. You're thinking, it's me. So I said to myself that I will do an MA in creative writing. I said, this is the final chance. You know when you're fighting with your passion and you're thinking, I give you one more chance, you writing career. So I said, I'll give it one more chance. I would apply for an MA if I get in. I just need to get it. In fact, I didn't even say if I get in. I said if I get invited to the interview, that's all. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to give up, pay the fees. I'm not going to do all that stress. But I go for the interview. We had a really lovely conversation. This was at Birkbeck University. And I began the MA. Now, towards the end of the MA, I had received a lot, and I know some of you are doing the MA now. I received a lot of feedback, a lot of which shaped my ability and my belief in being 100% yourself when you're writing a story. When you're writing, whatever it is you're writing, trying not to be other people. I went into the MA trying to write like John Grisham. Like you think about any author that was out there, I would take their books and look at it and think, I'm going to be the next, I'm going to be the next. And every time I shared my work in sort of workshops, there was always, we're not getting exactly who you are. And so the final feedback just before the girl with the louding voice was that I was not very good at writing characters that would stick or resonate. I took that really to heart. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to the basics, back to Lagos, back to Nigeria. And I'm really going to search inside of me and write about what I really, really care about, what really bothers me. At the time, I'd had a conversation with my daughter about housemaids. I asked her to help with the dishwasher, and she, as they do, she was 8 years old at the time. She went into a proper tantrum, didn't want to do that. And so I told her about some of the housemaids that I knew growing up that served my families, that served my family and the families around us. And my daughter wanted to know who these girls were. And I realized that actually I also want to know who these girls were, because a lot of these maids that worked for my family, housemaids are like servants, for those who don't know, who worked with my family and the families around us. It felt like they didn't have a voice. I really wanted to hear the voice of the girls that had lived with us, but people around us. And so I wrote the first 3,000 words of The Girl with the Louding Voice. I think it was about a week or a night before, I can't remember the exact timing, before I was meant to see my supervisor for my master's degree. And I remember walking into his office thinking he's going to trash it again, same old. I'm going to get done with this MA and maybe I'll go down the academic route, because I definitely know that I don't want to continue this 9-to-5 career. I didn't mention my career in 9-to-5 was in technology. I was doing technology. So I said, I will go, get this MA and maybe do a PhD, maybe try to teach others, because I love to speak. But he said to me that day, he said, Abi, this is really good. This was 3,000 words. Do you think you can finish this? And I said, absolutely not. Because this 3,000 words, which for those who don't know, The Girl with the Louding Voice is written in broken English or non-standard English. It's it's a combination of an invented language plus Nigerian's pidgin English plus a literal translation of Yoruba, my mother tongue, into English. And I cobbled it together to kind of give Aduni, this character, her voice. And this is because I wanted to try as much as possible to replicate the voice of some of the maids, the housemaids that lived with us growing up. A lot of them did not. In fact, I don't remember any of them attending school or speaking standard English. In Nigeria, the official language is English. So when you don't speak English properly or you don't speak it at all, there's this automatic perception, and basically the truth is that you are not educated and you've lost out on that. And so he said to me to finish it. My supervisor said to finish it. But I felt like I couldn't. But I felt also a little encouraged by that, by him saying, finish it. And again, for some of us, it might just be that finish it you need. Someone just says, just try. And for me, from him, he said, just finish it. So I finished The Girl with the Louding Voice, and I decided that I was going to try one agent. And once that agent says no, that's it. That's it. And it's funny because I'm having conversations with myself in front of a mirror. That's it. And so I applied to one agent in the US, and his response was maybe 2 hours later. One of the fastest responses I've ever heard. He said, Abi, this is interesting, but I don't see this on any of the shelves. And I cried. Like that, I literally just broke down and cried, thinking about all the journey coming into the UK, books 1 to 5 to 6 to 7, all of that. I just completely wept. And shortly around that time, another of my lecturers said to me, Abi, you could try competitions. And I'm going to talk about that a lot in this, because for me, that was the journey. She said, try a competition. So I looked online and I looked for a competition that was judged anonymously, because I believed that there was something with this Abi Daré that people didn't want to see. So I entered the Bath Novel Award in 2018, and The Girl with the Louding Voice won out of 1,700 or so entries. And my agent was judging the prize. She fell in love with the story. And I remember having a conversation with her, and she says, Abi, I love this, and let's see what happens with it. And so my book got published to a lot of success, as you've heard. And it was great. So that's sort of been my journey. It was great. It was wonderful to have that, to have opportunities to speak to people like you, to people like myself who are trying to do this again. And then I thought to add lines number 6 there, because it doesn't end with the first book. And for some people, it's the other way around. Their first book might not be such a success, and it might be the 7th or 10th book or 12th book. But the truth is, it's important for us all to realize that writing is a lifelong thing for many of us. And really and truly, it doesn't really matter. It's a great thing when your book does very well, but it shouldn't really matter how well the book does. I know that sounds, yeah, Abi, you're saying that because your book, but the truth is it could be your second or third book, or your fourth book, or your fifth book. What matters, I would say, is just constantly putting in what it takes, and we're going to go into that, and just loving the craft of writing and being committed to it. I say that I haven't tried selling shoes and all of that, but if you truly feel that this is what you are meant to do, it's really hard to step away from it. And that's why I told you this story. For me, writing is something I can never get away from. It hounds me, right? I have to tell stories. Now, the dreaded book 2 was really difficult to write. It was really, really difficult. I'd heard a lot of people say it's hard to write the next book, but I thought that's not going to happen to me until it happened to me. And finally, we have And So I Wrote, which just came out. So I thought to talk a little bit, now you know my journey, you saw where I talked about how I went into the MA in creative writing. I thought to talk about the pros and cons for me, for the MA in creative writing. Getting feedback from other writers or established writers. So on my course, there were writers who had been published. There were writers who had agents. And I remember looking at them like they were pure gold. They were like, oh my gosh, you have an agent, and there were writers who had careers in journalism and all of that. And they would offer amazing feedback. But however, on the flip side of that depends on where you are mentally, where you are in life. Sometimes that feedback can be harsh or overwhelming. Or if it's completely like, if you have a sort of skewed feedback, so 50% of the room says, this is amazing, and 50% says, I just don't get it. You're thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I remember that there was somebody in our course who, after the first seminar where we give feedback, I don't think she ever came back, and I don't know why. It might have been the feedback, but it was a beautiful group. Everybody was so knowledgeable, so kind and friendly, but no matter how kind and friendly people are, no matter what the intentions are, how you receive it is really up to you, right? And sometimes it can be harsh and overwhelming, but you have to realize that it's not personal. They're giving feedback to the work. It has nothing to do with you. Same thing for me and the books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and to infinity that I was writing at the time. It had nothing to do with me. I just needed to learn a little bit more about the writing process, or it just was that the story wasn't connecting. Networking, you connect with other writers, but also it can be competitive. If you are, and I talk a bit more about competition later on, if you are the kind of person that feels a bit overwhelmed by the fact that other people I remember there was somebody in our course that had signed a deal and her book was just waiting to come out. And so you're just at the start of your journey. Had not even written The Girl with the Louding Voice. So you might think, oh my gosh, like everybody seems to be doing so well. You go onto social media and you're getting so much book news and everywhere else, and it can be so hard sometimes. Time for me was also a thing. It can give you dedicated time to write. I was working 9 to 5, but I chose to do an MA in Birkbeck, which allowed me to to attend part-time, which meant I could keep my job, but it also meant that I could structure my writing of The Girl with the Louding Voice really around the MA. I was so determined to finish the book before the end of the MA. And for those, if you're just starting your MA and you're working on a book that is very exciting, I would really, really suggest, if you can, try to align your timelines to graduation or even before graduation. It really helps to give you that focus, especially because when you finish your master's degree or whatever degree you're doing, or whatever the course is, obviously if it's a long course, if you're not able to finish your book, life gets in the way. And that's the thing with writing, life, family, the job, everything gets in the way, and it can be really difficult to dedicate your time to it. So that was a plus for me. But on the downside was the cost of taking the time off work and paying the fees for the course itself, because I had to pay for it. Same thing with structure and discipline. I had that, but also it can be intense because you only have 2 years to do it. I talk about confidence. It really built my confidence, especially around being able to talk. I really, still till today, if you ask me if I'm working on a next book and you say, Abi, can you tell me what your next book is about? I really struggle. I saw some of you do that as well. How do you condense 80,000 words, 100,000 words into 5 sentences? It's really difficult. And doing the MA kind of helped to shape that, but also really helped me in confidence in how to give feedback to my own work, to look at my own piece of writing as a writer, not as somebody who is so attached to it as the owner of this work, but as somebody who can say that doesn't work. And then the outcome, it could lead to success, but many, many times it doesn't. And it's just knowing that for me, and I say to people that are thinking of it, it's knowing that going in with that acceptance is, okay, whatever comes out of this, success, what does success look like for me? Publishing success, i.e. getting a book published, for me is great, but you finishing, getting to the end, that's success, right? So define what success means for you, but for me, it was getting to the end of that course, of finishing it myself, but also thinking about the fact that when I say it may not lead to anything there, I put that in quotes, I didn't know, but I am. It's, when I say anything, I mean just getting a book out. To many people, that's the definition of the goal, but it doesn't have to be. So understand that you might go on to an academic career, which is very fulfilling for some, or you might just get the MA, which for me, at the point, I was very happy to do. I just wanted to go and get the MA, because I do like getting degrees, for some reason. I've talked a little bit about this, so what are the lessons that I learned in this journey? Right, I'm going to whiz through this. Rejection is fantastic for you because it helps you to, it's not personal, but it helps you to also know how to go in and come back, do better. If you fall, rise again and just do it. The first draft, horrible, horrible first draft. But you have to finish it. That's the truth. If you can't finish the book, finish the book, you will not have, and nobody's going to read your book if you don't finish it. Just remember, just tell yourself, nobody is going to read this book until I finish it. Try unconventional routes to publication. So I used the creative writing, the competition, but there are other ways to get your book out there. I talk about self-publishing. Not a lot of people like it, but I did it as well. For some of my books that got rejected, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do something with these books. I researched crowdfunding, or some people have gone on to start their own publishing houses. Define what success means for you. Define what it means for you. Yes, self-doubt is a thing, competition is a thing, looking at other people, I talked about that. Please, your voice is unique, own your voice, own your story. Even if you find that somebody else has written exactly what you want to write, but that is the story. The voice is completely different. The voice is yours. The way you're going to put the words on the page is completely different. It's yours. Take feedback lightly and seriously, so take constructive feedback, but know when it's a bit too much. Know when it's feedback that is coming from a place of somebody who really just doesn't get your work or doesn't understand what you're trying to say, and invest in you. So read books, attend courses, find mentors, absolutely stay motivated, believe in yourself and your story. And the final thing, this is really tiny, so I'm just going to, I don't know what I was thinking when I put this on the page. But, passion. Be passionate about what you do. Let passion be what pushes you and fuels you. Listen to the sound. So when you're writing, let your writing let it play music in your ears. And remember the first time I heard that, I didn't understand it, but I'm saying read out loud and listen to the beats. How many pauses do you have? Do you have a point where your sentences are really long and then not so long? How does your writing sound in your ears? Listen out to the sound and the rhythm of your writing and enjoy it. I don't really know much about music, but I say to people, when I read certain writers, I can hear the sound in their writing. Listen to your characters. So this is when you're actually writing. Trust your characters. The girl with the louding voice, Aduni, wanted to be written in broken English, and it had to be in first person. So try to know your characters, trust them enough. It might mean you writing first person, then third, then second, then first. You might have to do that. Try that until you get to the point where you feel like your fingers do not want to stop typing or writing, depending on how you write. Again, don't be afraid to take creative risks. So experiment with different writing styles. If second person is your thing, try that. Try, playing around with punctuation. Try doing different things. Take creative risks. Don't be motivated by money, as I was. Remember the entrepreneur thing? I said I was going to stop the 9-to-5 and start selling also because I thought money was what I wanted. But it's first of all, getting money from writing, Well, it's not just something that happens like that. So I would say just don't. Don't focus on trends, not because everybody's writing the next Twilight or whatever is out there, you're going to do the same. Really write what's in your heart. Write the story that you want to write, the story you've been longing to see on the shelves and you've not seen it. Finding a publisher, be patient, can take a long time. The industry is very slow. Keep your day job, Abby. But don't let that stop you from chasing your dream if that's what you want. Move on very quickly. Move on to the next book. Let me explain what I mean by that very quickly. So if you've written the first book, you've exhausted everything, you're getting a lot of no's, it's okay to park it for a bit. There's something powerful about parking your work for a bit and going back to it later. Your eyes will open to a lot of the errors you've made. I've looked back at some of I have these books that I've written in the folder called Do Not Delete folder. You can use that. Basically, it means just shove everything there, but don't ever get rid of it because there might be a description of the sun or the weather that is so powerful in the midst of 100,000 words that you can just copy and paste into your new work. But just keep writing. You can never use up creativity. The more you use it, the more. So it's like it's an exercise. Just keep doing that. Make writing a regular habit. And finally, if you do when you get to the point of getting an agent, please choose your agent wisely. I say this because I've heard so many stories of people getting on it with agents and it's not working. And the whole book, sometimes the whole career is completely sort of down the drain. So please get along with your agent. Make sure it's somebody you respect and they respect you. And yeah, but it is a business, but it's like finding a good friend. I believe that is the last slide. Oh gosh, okay. Okay, so you already know a lot of this, but do your research in terms of finding publishers. Understand and know who your target audience is. At a point, I was applying, I was sending my manuscripts to anybody. I didn't care. I was so desperate. Targeted agent submissions. Do you need an agent? There's some pieces of work that don't necessarily need an agent. You can sometimes apply directly to the publishers. Some publishers have windows where they open up for you to sign in, but I would definitely say I would recommend you get an agent because the business of publishing is really, really difficult to navigate. But check whether you need an agent and then go along with what you want. And if you do, identify agents who specialize in your genre and have a track record of signing similar offers to you, obviously, write a really compelling query letter, but also enter writing competitions. Like this is the thing I say to a lot of people. There's so many out there these days across the world, not just in the UK, in Australia and in the US. Apply to these because you get good feedback. Sometimes you even get an agent on the back of it. If your agent happens to be judging your work, that's an automatic pass without you needing to write the dreaded query. It was a dread for me. I really hated it. But ensure your manuscript is professional, is polished, is ready, as ready as it can be. If you want to self-publish, really weigh it. It requires a lot of effort in marketing. And if the book fails on submission, this is a thing. I've had a lot of friends who have, their books have gone round and has failed. Or the book gets published and doesn't do as well. Learn from the experience, get the feedback, revise your work if you can. Sometimes people consider a completely different genre or actually use a different name because your work has gone around so many times for a particular genre. You can consider that as well, but have a conversation with your agent or experiment new storytelling techniques, but don't ever give up. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah? Do you have questions for Abi?
Come on. There we go.
Yeah?
Hi.
How do you mentioned about finding mentors. How would you go about that?
That is a very interesting question. So there are two ways to do that. One is by potentially approaching an author that maybe has a mentorship program running. I think there are quite a few of them that do that. I'm looking to start one at some point. But also, you could actually have mentors that don't even know who you are. So what I mean by that is, if you have a particular author that you really admire the way they write, make it a habit to take their books, right, and actually study it as if you're not reading it for the story now. You're reading their work for how they structure their sentences, for how they, where they put their punctuation marks. You're not copying what they're doing. You're just looking at the discipline behind their writing, the structure, the voice. So that's another way. But also, I think there's so many people out there these days that give a lot of writing advice online. So find those people that are able to do that. Sometimes I go on YouTube and I just check out writers that, some of them are not even published, but they really understand the whole business and structure of writing, and I listen to them. So there are different ways of doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for telling us about the hard draft that you did before you got published.
Mm-hmm.
It's very encouraging for us. Well, what happens after you get published? About the publicizing, how do you get invited to literary festivals? How do you get to do a keynote address?
That's very interesting. And great question. I think for me, because I know not a lot of writers are interested in, not a lot of writers want to actually speak. So I was one of those that quickly said to my agent at the time, so when you get published, you have an agent and hopefully you have a publicist, somebody who is assigned to help to market your book if you're not self-publishing, right? That with you and that person will have a conversation around what are your interests? Where do you shine? Where do you see that you would thrive? And I was one of those that said, look, I love speaking. I enjoy sort of speaking to audiences, and so they were able to work with me. But the truth also is that the success of your book can dictate what you're invited to. So if you have a really big book, or you're a really big author, or there's a lot of noise about the book, then you find that you get invitations. But you see, it's the story that sells the book. I know there is a need to have a marketing budget, but there are many books that have been published where it started really quiet. Not a lot of people knew about it. People began to talk about it. Book Talk picked it up. Bookstagram picked it up. Before you know it, everybody's asking for the book. And because people are asking for your book, you will get invited to speak in different panels. And it might be just a book club meeting at first, answering questions about your book, and then it might then move on to other things. So I think it's really, I would say, if I were you, I'd say really, really focus on writing that book. And then the next conversation should be, hopefully when you get published, or before you get published, you will have somebody who would help to market your book, have a conversation with them, and see what happens after that. But what you can control right now is the book that you're writing. You're welcome.
Any more questions?
When you were writing the book,
Which of the 10 books?
do you have an ideal reader in mind? Like, I've just started my MA and realising how important that is. I just kind of get stuck on the writing side of it.
Can I say don't do that? Don't do that to yourself. This is why I talked about because every single book I was writing, I had an agent in mind, not even just a reader. I thought I will send it to this New York agent. I didn't even want the UK ones. I was like, New York. I'll send it to this agent in New York, and they're gonna love it. But they didn't love it. Or they had somebody else in their books who was already doing something similar. Write what you really want to write, and let there be an audience of one, yourself. So, which is why I say listen to the sound of your work, fall in love with your work, let your passion really, really because readers can sense the passion in your work. And that's why when you find some authors that have churned out so many books, after a while, people kind of lose interest because they feel like it's just a formula. The passion for some is not there anymore. So let the passion be there and be an audience for yourself, at least the first draft. When you get to the end, because you really need to get to the end first, and as you start revising, then you can now start checking and seeing, okay, does this fit in anywhere? Is there anything I need to do to edit this? But don't be bogged down by that, please. Just finish the book because you want to. Yeah.
How much of your work was edited, and were you happy with that?
Oh, extensively edited. I think, but then, the girl with extensively, maybe that's a bit of exaggeration for the girl with the loud voice. Second one, maybe that's so the way it happens is you send your work in. The book was written in standard broken English, so kind of editing the voice wasn't something that you could do because it was her voice. It's invented, right? But the structure of the story. So I had to cut out, I think it was about 25,000 words out, and then had to find another sort of 20K to slot in Aduni's voice. That was really difficult because I thought at the time I had lost the ability to write in her voice. For And So I Roar, my second book, I have I have characters. I have the main character, two main characters, one who speaks standard English and one who doesn't. And so the editing process, again, there was, the ending was, I had to add in one more thing. And so you will often get pages and pages of notes, and you're left to you're left to just go and do your thing. Once you've done that, and those notes are, maybe it could be something like the ending, we don't feel connected to the ending. You might get something like that and you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? Then you need to think about it. And so you're really given about a month or two, or however long it is you've agreed with your editors, and then you make those edits and then put it back in, and then you then go into the proofreading, structure, line edits, and all of that. That's easy. I think it's when you get the notes that's the hardest part, because you then have to go back into that creative room and invent things. Because if you're told, imagine if you're told to take out 30,000 words of what you thought was absolutely incredible writing, and then you need to put it back in. So it was, a mix for me. Book 2 was, I think, was a lot more edits than book 1.
So when you talked about writing, you talk about it as an art form. How do you find approaching the market afterwards? Because obviously, there is the market, there is the trend cycle, there is what audiences want, and the shelving things. How do you approach finding your niche, I suppose?
So that's an interesting question, but also really difficult for me to answer. I'll tell you why. Because of the way I went about getting published. So all the books that didn't do well, when I was writing those based on what I saw was on the shelves. Like Twilight was on the shelves at the time. I was like, okay, maybe I could try to write an African vampire story. It was just madness, right? And I'm trying to do that, and I know that my heart is not in it. I know that I'm struggling. Right, as much as I love to write, I'm waking up and I'm sitting at my desk and I'm kind of dreading, because I honestly don't know what's going to come next. And sometimes that's part of the journey, right? But if you're really passionate about it, and this is why I keep going back to really write what you want to write, because trends shift, right? You could think there's something really trending today, and all of a sudden something happens in the news, and that shifts everything. And so you spent a whole year writing what you think is trending, and there's something in the news, I don't know, Donald Trump wins, and then everybody starts writing something else. And you're thinking, oh my gosh. And remember that publishing is a long, so from the time you submit your manuscript, each time it's taking about 18 months from hitting send to my editors, not even my agent, to get published. A lot can happen in 18 months. So try and not really think about trends, really just write what you want to write. But in terms of marketing and stuff, so like I said, if you are lucky enough to get a publisher that has a big marketing budget for you, fantastic. But even with that, these days you really have to sell yourself. So if you're not on social media, it's hard. I hate it, but you really have to try and talk about your book, do all these things that everybody's doing, because there's so much competition out there. But I say, first of all, write an irresistible story. For me, that is the biggest way to market your book. When you write a book that people cannot stop talking about. I've talked about a few books that have come out by a really, really tiny publisher that has gone on to do amazing things because it was such a well-written book, or it talks about something so important, or it happens to be very timely. So at the time the author was writing it, they clearly would have no idea that it would be timely, right? And they've written this book, and then all of a sudden, it's just gone off. So really just follow your heart, and when the book comes out, do what you can to market, do what you can to talk about your book on social media, do what you can to get people to read your book and talk about it, but you really can't control that. It's really can be frustratingly difficult once the book is out, which is why I'm saying that what you can control is really what you put into the book. Let that be what gets at least 89% of your attention. The rest, see what happens after the book comes out.